Good morning, Abdul.
Hello, good morning.
Shall we discuss Roy Cashew economy in West Africa?
Yeah, yeah. You mean the problems?
Yes.
Yeah, cashew processing is facing a lot of problem in West Africa, particularly in Ivory Coast, where we are recording the video from. The government of Ivory Coast has had a big ambition to process more than 50% of his raw cashew between now and 2025. And that target is going to be hard to hit, but things are moving on the ground. A lot of things are being done in terms of policy to make that happen.
From what you heard from the processors, what are the main challenges they faces now?
There are many challenges. One of the first challenge that they face is the access to raw cashew, because as you know, in order to run a factory, you need the raw material, and there are a lot of competition between cashew processors and exporters, and also international buyers from foreign countries that come to buy to go and feed the factory abroad. So there are a lot of competition to acquire raw material. Therefore, many factories that are set up in Ivory Coast, even though the country is the first producer in the world, they are facing challenges to acquire raw material. The other problem is you see in Africa, banks are very reluctant to finance cashew processing. The risk appetite is not as it is in Dubai, Vietnam, or India. Therefore, it's very difficult to access finance. And when you are lucky to get finance, the interest rate is very high. It can go up to 18% annually for a simple loan, a working capital. Finance is very expensive, even though it's very rare. That's a problem. The other problem they face is a lack of experience, okay? The labor force need a lot of training. If you take a traditional country like India, Vietnam, they have many decades of experience into cashew processing, so they had a chance to refine and develop the processes. But for African country in West Africa, it's a new challenge. So they are learning the curve, they are learning the processes, and they are training the labor force. So in essence, these are three main issues, even though there are many others.
Okay. What kind of solution can you give to the factories in West Africa from your experience?
For example, training, they can send their staff to India, Vietnam to learn new trainings and learn how it's happening there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are countries with a vast amount of experience. It's to go to those countries and learn from them. I think that will be helpful. The other thing the government is doing in Ivory Coast is to allow factories to acquire their raw material first before they can allow other people to buy, okay? That also is very helpful. So the government of Ivory Coast is providing a lot of incentive to processors. For example, there's a subsidy for every kg of cashew process, getting something. So that's to be encouraged. In order to access also the raw material, raw cashew, I will advise factories to be set up in a production area, okay? There were cases of few factories closing down, but in a place called Bassam, which are not production areas. So it's an unfair game when you set up your factory in an area where you don't have immediate access to your raw commodities. So people have to travel from northern Ivory Coast or eastern Ivory Coast to bring you goods so you can run your factory. So that's not beneficial. So the advice is set up in the places like Korobo, in Bunduku, where you can access the raw material close to you, right? Financing, that's the big challenge. I think the government has been trying over the past few years to have a guarantee, which is provide a guarantee on behalf of the processor so they can have loan, they can have access to finance, whether it's working capital loan to acquire raw material, etc.
Okay. I noticed that the final product are quite specific compared to Vietnam and Indian product. How can you explain that?
Again, that's due to many things. The Indian and Vietnamese, they are very well versed in terms of reducing their cost. The other thing is they are due to differences in the currency. Ivory Coast, for example, use the franc CFA, so the currency also can have an impact on the final product. The cost of water, electricity, obviously are more expensive in Africa. So therefore, that would increase the final product, final cost. Again, that will increase the offering from Ivory Coast. So there are a number of things. For example, even things like roads. There were issues to get to production areas. Even though Ivory Coast has done a lot of efforts, a lot of roads has been built to facilitate access to raw material, etc. So there are a number of things that cause this situation. But I think with the time and experience, they will reduce the costing.